Hello and welcome to the CouchScouts Podcast Episode 35. And the band is back together. All three of us, first time in a while. Jackson, welcome back, man. Congratulations on the birth of your baby girl.
I
How's
appreciate
everything
that.
going for you?
Everything's going good, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be back, though, man. I missed you guys. Missed being on the podcast for a couple weeks, but as you all know, I was taking care of a newborn. So I mean that comes with its own challenges in and of itself. Man, mom's doing great, baby's doing great. We're just transitioning into a nice little family of four now.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, you getting any sleep yet?
A little bit. She sleeps in about 3.5 hour stretches sometimes, which as a newborn, that's about all you can ask for, right?
Yeah, that's better than most.
So it's so strange. Like I wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh, I guess I can. I mean, my video game career, guys, has been taking off. I know I've texted you guys out recently. I've been really diving into these video games at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I've got nothing.
You're not getting up and grinding the film, man. Come on, bro. You got to get in the film room.
Gotta get in the film room. You see, we did so much grinding in the film room on that rookie guide. I needed a little bit of a break, so I'm grinding the video games now.
That's awesome, man. Well, hey, speaking of the rookie guide, real quick before we get into tonight's show, wanted to remind you guys if you're not in, we've got two things we really want to let you guys know about. One is our free Discord. You got to hop in there. Guys are chatting in there every day. It's a really fun group. We'll help you navigate your drafts and your trades and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is the rookie guide. Now, I know a lot of rookie drafts have happened already, but if you are still drafting and you need a great resource to help you navigate through it, we put in a lot of hours to put out a great resource for you guys. It is over 70 pages of PDF with detailed breakdowns of basically anybody you could even think about drafting in a fantasy rookie draft. We got our rankings, we got our film scores, and you can get the whole thing for $10. So the links for the Discord and the rookie guide will be in the description on this video on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts. So definitely check those things out. But tonight we're going to be starting a new series that's going to carry us forward for the next month or so. And we're going to be using Startup ADP from Dynasty Data Lab. We're going to go position by position, discussing which players on your Dynasty rosters have the most to gain and the most to lose this upcoming season. And tonight we're going to be starting at the most important position if you play in superflex leagues, and that is the quarterback position. So we're going to be talking about quarterbacks who have the most to gain and the most to lose this upcoming season. And we each kind of picked one to gain and one to lose. So let's get right into it. And we'll start with you, Rupert. Who did you choose as your quarterback with the most to gain coming into the 2024 season?
Bit of a homer pick, but I went with Bryce Young, mainly just due to his ADP. Right now at that quarterback 20, and I feel like with just one good season, that's going to rise dramatically. And I see all the pieces there now, right? Last year, he had a lame duck head coach with Frank Reich, not really running a system that worked well with their offensive line, running its own scheme when they're more of a power blocking. The skill set of offensive linemen, they didn't have a single wide receiver that could separate and win one-on-one. They didn't have guys that were winning contested catch situations. What do? They go out and get Deontay Johnson, who can win one-on-one, beat any corner on with his route running. They drafted Xavier Legette, who we all agree is not the best route runner. But what he does do is win contested catch situations. So when he needs it, he can throw it up to him. And, you got about a 60-70% chance of him coming down with the ball. And then the biggest piece, I think, is Coach Canales. What has he done the last couple of years? Brought back Geno Smith from being irrelevant for 8 years in a row. And, he went on to have a Pro Bowl season and looked like a viable starter. Then last year it goes to Tampa and resurrects Baker Mayfield's career. And I think he's just going to do the exact same with Bryce Young this year. They got the weapons now. They also invested like $200 million in the offensive line, particularly at the guard position where they really struggled last year. So I think all the pieces are lining up for Bryce Young to really shoot up in his ADP this year.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And, obviously I hope you're right because I'm a Panthers fan too. But I mean, we saw a rough rookie year out of Trevor Lawrence and, like you said, bounce back sophomore year and he jumps straight back up to being a first round startup pick. So yeah, I think there's a lot of room for Bryce Young to shoot way up by this time next year. And I saw a tweet the other day, and I wish I could remember whose it was to give credit, but they kind of highlighted there's 4 players ever that have been the number 1 overall pick and had a rookie season as bad as Bryce Young had. And those 4 players, it was, or no, maybe it was 3 players. Bryce Young was the 4th. And so the other 3, it was Sam Bradford, so not great. But the other 2 were Trevor Lawrence and Matthew Stafford. So, I mean, they've gone on to have fine careers. So, yeah, I think Bryce Young is far from dead, and he is pretty cheap right now.
I completely agree with you guys. That was something that I think, Rupert, when me and you were podcasting a little bit ago before I went on that hiatus, that was one of the guys that I love to really shoot up in rankings and just ADP overall this coming season. They've invested in him heavily. They've got him a true wide receiver 1 in Deontay Johnson. They've got him a running back that we all loved in our rookie guide. And and Jonathan Brooks. So I mean, they've invested in him. They've given him the weapons to do something well, and they've gotten him in an offensive line, which I think is the most important thing, like you said. I mean, Every Panthers game that I watched last year, Bryce Young was running for his life. So maybe if you give him a little more pocket presence, I mean, at his ADP right now, I mean, I love that pick, and I think he's somebody that you're going to see not being able to get there next season.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jackson, who did you highlight as a guy with the most to gain?
So this feels like a little cheap, I guess, but I took J.J. McCarthy. We haven't seen any of the rookies play yet, so I know there's some unknown about J.J. McCarthy, but he's QB 19 right now, and I'm looking at some of the guys that are going above him in startup drafts. I mean, you got Drake May going above him. You've got guys like Jared Goff, who's getting older. He had a great season, but he's getting older up there in age. You've got guys like Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence, who had a bad year last year. I mean, all of these guys, I think he has the potential to climb above ADP right now of all of those guys. I mean, he's got Justin Jefferson. He's tied to the best wide receiver in the league right now. He's got Jordan Addison to throw the ball to. They've got a great offense that they're surrounding him around with. And honestly, when you look at J.J. McCarthy, I don't think we've quite seen his potential yet. He was in an offense with Michigan where they ran the ball a lot. They didn't ask him to air it out. But when we watched this film, we really liked what we saw out of J.J. McCarthy. And I think he's somebody that, I mean, you're looking at him right now as QB 19. I think that's a steal in startup drafts right now. And I can see him going in the 3rd to 4th round at the latest if he has a season that I think he's going to have.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I hope we haven't seen his season ceiling yet, because if we have, it ain't great. But he's got a great supporting cast. To me, I mean, I wouldn't take him above any of the guys that you just mentioned that are above him. Maybe Drake May, but that'd be it. So I kind of get it why he's ranked the way he is. It's just so much sight unseen, but he does have the draft capital. He is in a great situation. A guy that it kind of reminds me of, and I hope that his career doesn't take this path, but Kenny Pickett, when he came in as a rookie, he had a great supporting cast. I mean, he had George Pickens, he had Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, and first round draft capital, just like JJ McCarthy. Not quite as high in the first round, but I think that's the downside, is that if McCarthy doesn't produce with that supporting cast, then we just know, like, who's the problem? It's McCarthy. And so he's a guy that could see his value go up for sure with a good rookie season, but it could go down. And I don't know what the upside is there. Like if he ends up finishing like QB 15, 16, something like that, like mid-range QB2, I think that'd be a pretty big success for his rookie year.
You see, I just feel like the upside is so much better with him, though. I mean, you're looking at QB 19. That's a back-end QB2. If Kirk Cousins can finish as a QB1 in that offense, being what he was. I mean, he wasn't an elite take over the game type of quarterback, and he finished as a QB1 several seasons. I mean, why can't J.J. McCarthy do that? Who I watched his film in so many games at Michigan. His ability to thread the needle, to have great arm talent, just he wasn't utilized as much as he could have been at Michigan. So I think that the ceiling is much higher than a lot of people are giving him credit for.
Rupert, what do you think, man? Break the tie here.
I agree with Jackson. I don't view him anywhere near like I viewed Pickett. I really didn't like Pickett's tape at all. I didn't really see a bunch of arm talent, and I saw a lot more with McCarthy. So I'd lean towards he has a higher ceiling than Pickett I ever saw with Pickett.
And I'm not saying, just to be clear, that I think he's Kenny Pickett or that their tape looks the same to me. I don't want to buy too much into the supporting cast and build our whole argument around the supporting cast. It was the point that I was trying to make with Kenny Pickett. But go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, agreed. Like if he doesn't succeed with the supporting cast, then it is a big knock on him, and we're going to see his, ADP tumble. But I feel like he has a pretty safe floor and then a pretty decently high ceiling.
Well, that's why it's most to gain, right? Just because I'm not buying, like, my entire argument, I guess, isn't built off of the supporting cast, but that's a large majority of it. Because I mean, you look at it, somebody who has the most to gain. I mean, for where J.J. McCarthy is getting drafted, if he just goes out and does what he's supposed to, his skill players are going to propel him to a QB1 or QB1 type of finish. And that's nowhere near where he's being drafted at right now.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just, I don't know if you're giving enough credit to Kirk Cousins, to be honest. I think he's a really good quarterback and has developed over the course of his career, and they trusted him to throw the ball a ton. I mean, Minnesota threw the ball more than anybody the last couple of years with Kirk Cousins, and I just don't know that we're going to see that with a rookie quarterback. I think, they brought in Aaron Jones. I think they're going to run the ball a lot. And we've never seen J.J. McCarthy throw a high volume, even in college. We'll see. We'll see, but
it could go either way. Like I can see where you're coming from too, for sure.
Just like all these guys, it can go either way.
Yeah, that's
Speaking of going either way, who was your pick, Cooper?
Yeah. I mean, I took a guy, and so maybe I viewed this differently than you guys because I'm not picking this player because I think it'll happen. I think it, the range of outcomes. So I chose Will Levis, Tennessee Titans, and he's ADP QB 25, which to me, when you talk about a guy that is just in his second year, he's super young. He's got a lot of, physical traits at least, and a pretty good draft capital investment from the team. I know it was a different coaching staff, different regime that drafted him, but early second round, that's not the type of guy that you just throw away without giving him a real shot. And so they have given him a real shot. They went out there and they got him. He still has DeAndre Hopkins, but they add Calvin Ridley. They add Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears coming into his second year. So he, speaking of supporting cast, I think he's got a pretty good one around him, and they've done everything to give him a shot. Now we'll see. He's not a guy that I liked as a prospect. He's not a guy that I have a ton of belief in as a player, but at his age, if he comes out and even has like a QB 14 type of season, like in Dynasty, he's going to shoot way up from that QB 25 price tag. You don't have to spend a ton to take a shot on him. You can have him as the third quarterback on your team. And so I do think he's got a ton to gain this year. Whereas how much does he have to lose? He's already QB 25. It's not
how much further
like you're right. So, I mean, I think he's got a lot to gain and not a lot to lose. I mean, he could lose his job, so that's something.
Yeah.
I mean, he could go from QB 25 to basically worthless, but I think there's a lot of room for him to fly up draft boards too. So y'all have any thoughts on Will Levis?
Yeah, I love that pick, especially with the coaching staff they brought in. They got rid of Vrabel pretty much because he's not really known to develop quarterbacks, so they went out and hired a coach that's known to help develop quarterbacks. So I really like what they've done in the offseason, even though I initially didn't like the firing of Vrabel, but I think they're setting it up to kind of move that team to being more offensive centric and really helping build around Levis. So I agree. If he hits his ceiling, my God, he's going to move up more than anybody this year. And I wouldn't mind seeing that living in Titans country now.
I like that. I like that pick better a few months removed from the season, because you're looking at that pick a few months ago, and a few months ago they had Derrick Henry, they had no wide receivers. I mean, what was the path really like for him to do anything? Now they're going to a more passing attack. At least it looks like it. They brought in Calvin Ridley, who I really like as a wide receiver one for that team. And again, his ADP, like you just mentioned, I mean, he can't really drop any lower. So I think that's a phenomenal pick.
Yeah, and they had a chance. They were pretty high in the draft this year. If they had really said, hey, it's a new coaching staff, we didn't draft Levis, we want to get our guy, I mean, they could have done that. So they gave him at least a year to try and show that he can be a long-term starter for them. So we'll see how it goes. Before we get into our quarterbacks with the most to lose, I wanted to take a second to hit dynastynerds.com. So for those of you that don't know, I am at least partially employed by Dynasty Nerds. I help run the film room. It is a huge resource that we have been using throughout rookie season to study these rookies for ourselves. There's tons and tons of all 22 in the film room. Y'all have heard us talking about it. It is a great place to get in and study these rookies. But it's also a great resource the rest of the year, too. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about, you get an extra podcast, and their podcast is phenomenal, by the way. And they're way bigger than we are, so you've probably heard of them. But check out Dynasty Nerds podcast if you haven't. I mean, you get a Dynasty GM where you can analyze your leagues, trade calculators, rankings. Like, there's so many different things you get with a Nerd Herd membership, and you can get 15% off of that with the promo code COOP. So definitely check out dynastynerds.com. We love those guys. So let's get into it. The quarterbacks with the most to lose coming into the 2024 season. And we'll start with you, Jackson. Who is your quarterback with the most to lose?
So this kind of hurts me a little bit because you guys know me. I'm a diehard Eagles fan. I will always root for them. I watch every game every Sunday. Love my Philadelphia Eagles. But with that being said, I did pick Jalen Hurts as the quarterback with the most to lose. He's overall the QB4 right now and the fourth player overall getting drafted in Dynasty startup drafts, according to Dynasty Data Labs. You look at where he's being drafted right now and some of the things that he's got working against him. I mean, just a few things. I mean, he didn't protect the ball well last year at all. 20 turnovers in 2023. Just couldn't keep the ball in his hands. He was throwing interceptions, yes, but fumbles were a big issue for him. Most of the fantasy points, I'm not going to say all of them, but a large majority of his fantasy points were based off of the fact that he was getting those 1-yard rush tush push touchdowns. You look at his ceiling, I guess, or where he's at coming into this season. The team no longer has Jason Kelce on the roster at that center position. And I've been telling guys all offseason, I think the loss of Jason Kelce is going to make more of a difference than people want to give that credit for. I think they're going to be a lot slower. They're not going to look as good as they would with Jason Kelce back there behind center. He was the heart and soul of that team. The tush push, I don't think is going to be, while it's still going to be effective, I don't think it's going to be nearly as good. They've got a new system with new coordinators. Yes, you got Kellen Moore, who's a great offensive mind, but Jalen Hurts is once again going to have to learn a new offensive system. And historically speaking, when that's happened, the first year hasn't looked too terribly great. So all of those things I think are really working against him right now. And you look at his QB4, fourth overall startup potential right now. I mean, you got Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson. I mean, a bunch of guys who I just think have a much clearer path to finishing above him in fantasy right now. He's not going to drop a ton. He's still going to be a high overall startup pick. But when you talk about most to lose, there could potentially be a problem with Jalen Hurts this year. And I don't think many people are talking about it right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, last year, like, the fantasy points were there, like you said, but there were definitely some yellow flags. Like, if you watch the games, there were some underlying, like, man, he just doesn't look that good this year relative to the year before when he really broke out and stormed onto the scene. It was the QB1, and it looked like he just developed so much as a passer. And then last year, it kind of looked like he took a step backwards in that department. And so you don't want to see that trend continue. And if it does, I mean, I think you're going to start to see dynasty managers wanting to sell because they're going to think, well, the fantasy points are still there, and so I can get a big return for him, but I don't know if I believe in the guy long term. And so you're going to see people starting to think, well, I want to get out on this guy. I could definitely see that with another. I mean, I don't even want to say another bad season because fantasy wise, he had a really good season last year.
And that's the disconnect, right? Because he's scoring the fantasy points, but when you watch him, something was off last year. His decision making, the way he was processing defenses, wasn't really there, and that's concerning.
For sure,
I couldn't agree more that the loss of Jason Kelce is going to hurt way more than people anticipate. I remember when Ryan Quill retired from the Panthers, and that set us back for years on the offensive line. Just the coordination, the communication from the center to the rest of the line, it's just so vital, and I don't think the average football fan really truly appreciates it.
For sure. Well, Rupert, while we got you, who was your quarterback with the most to lose?
I went with the guy that I love and I own a decent amount of shares of, and that's Anthony Richardson. And I'm picking him. He's QB8 as of right now. You know, he has a ceiling to be the QB1.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is he only appeared in 4 games last year, suffered concussions, and suffered a season-ending shoulder injury, right? And had surgery. There's been reports of he's had to take some rest this offseason, hadn't been able to fully participate in OTAs. And in the weeks where I was shopping around just to see what I could get, I couldn't get anywhere near what I thought I could get for him. And the reality is everyone's kind of viewing him as injury prone right now, especially with his playing style. And if he has another season that is filled with injuries, I feel like his ADP is just going to tank. And, you know, everyone's going to be out on him. No one's going to want to trade for him just because he's going to have that injury prone moniker. And it's going to be hard for that to go away, especially being more of a running quarterback.
I think that's an interesting pick because he's kind of like Jalen Hurts, right? He's got the rushing upside where he's going to score fantasy points, but let's not pretend when he came into the league that he wasn't a developmental quarterback. His arm he has some arm talent, but he was very raw when it came to throwing the football. And we haven't really seen him prove at the NFL level that he can do that with elite level effectiveness. So you look at his startup ADP, and that's something to be worried about. I mean, you're not going to sustain QB1 seasons where dynasty managers feel comfortable holding you long term if all you're going to offer is rushing upside. You've got to be able to throw the football too if you're going to last in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that the reason his ADP is as high as it is because everyone knows what that upside is and that he could be QB1 overall and he could win you your league. But the floor is absolutely there. And, you know, I think, like you said, Rupert, with the sample size, we can't say definitively that he's going to be a good NFL quarterback yet at this point. Like for a franchise, like for fantasy wise, I think he's going to be a guy that puts up points. But for an NFL franchise, like, is he going to go out this year and show that he is the franchise guy and he's a superstar and the Colts, he's their future? Or, I mean, might he go out and have like a Justin Fields type of a season where it's like, man, he's just not processing the field well and he's running for his life and he's, you know, first read only, holding the ball too long. Like, we don't know what he's going to look like as a passer this year. And then there is the injury risk. I mean, you and I, as Panthers fans, Rupert, saw what a shoulder injury and a shoulder surgery like that did to Cam Newton's career. So I really hope that doesn't affect Richardson in the same way because he's so young and he's got such a bright future in front of him. I would hate for his an injury like that to kind of derail his career this early on. But we've seen, I mean, that's your throwing shoulder that can, if that doesn't heal right, if it's still not right coming into this year, like that can cause long-term issues for sure. So
I think the Cam Newton pick is the Cam Newton mention there. That's something to be concerned or something to note, right? Because you watched Cam Newton before injury and after injury, and he couldn't push the ball downfield. He didn't have the arm strength anymore. He looked like a different quarterback, and it forced him out of the league. So, I mean, I think that's a very good thing for you to point out.
Yeah, everybody's talking about the enticing ceiling of Richardson, and not a lot of people are really talking about the downside. So as much as we all love him and hope for the best, and he's exciting, and it would be good for the sport and good for fantasy players, good for everybody if he balls out. I think it's good to be aware and cognizant that there's the opposite could happen too. So as we wrap up here, my quarterback with the most to lose going into this season was Dak Prescott. And I don't say that because I think he's going to be terrible this year. I say that because, for one thing, he was QB3 last season, and he still is just QB15 in dynasty ranks. So that should tell you something. Like, he does not have a lot of room to go up, no matter how good he is this season. People are not going to boost him way up their rankings. So he's got almost nothing to gain from a fantasy perspective, and he's got a lot to lose because he's under a contract year. They have not signed him to a long-term extension. I mean, even if he doesn't play bad, but he just gets injured, right? Like, that could be catastrophic for his career. So much of his value is tied to being with the Cowboys. So let's say they don't re-sign him long-term and he goes off to a different team. The future is kind of a little murky. He's 30. He's on the wrong side of 30 years old right now. Like, his dynasty value, if he just has a mediocre season, or if he gets hurt, or even just if he does fine, but then the Cowboys move on from him and he's with a new team, like, his value in dynasty could absolutely plummet by this time next year. So that's why I've got Dak Prescott as the quarterback with the most to lose. What do you guys think?
That was a good point, because something that I'm sitting here thinking is, how long are the Cowboys going to continue to give Dak Prescott shots? You're looking at that team, and as much as I hate the Cowboys, they're a team that's built to contend for a Super Bowl. And Dak Prescott continually does not get it done in the playoffs. So, I mean, how many more chances are you going to give him before you're like, okay, we're done, we're going to cut loose, and we're going to try somebody else? And then, like you said, I mean, his value is tied to the Cowboys. It's tied to CeeDee Lamb. It's tied to that offense. I mean, if he goes somewhere else, is he going to have the same upside? And as you've already mentioned, he can't climb much further. He's not going to climb much further than he already is. So it's a classic case of, you have nothing to gain but everything to lose.
For sure. And I mean, they don't have a running game. So, like, he's going to throw the ball a lot. He's got great weapons around him. He's probably going to have another good season. But I just think in a contract year on the wrong side of 30, with all the things that we've talked about, even with a good fantasy season, it's not hard to see his dynasty stock just falling right out from under his feet.
Yeah, 100% agree. I could totally see him ending up on a different team, and then everyone panicking like, oh, he didn't get done with the Cowboys, all those weapons. Like, what is he going to do on a new team and new system, everything like that. So I think it's a really great call out.
Yeah. Well, great show, guys. Next week, we're going to be talking about running backs with the most to gain and the most to lose. So if you're listening, definitely tune back in for that. And check out the Dynasty Nerds. Check out our Discord. Get the rookie guide if you haven't. We appreciate you guys watching. Would love for you guys to leave a like, comment, sub. If you're on Apple, leave us a 5-star review. All those things, they just help people find the show. And we're new and we're growing, and we really appreciate y'all's support in that way. So as we wrap up here, Matt Jackson, tell them where they can find you on X.
Yeah, you guys can find me on X at DevyMatt. Always love to connect with you guys. Reach out if you have any questions. We'd love to talk about them on the show, or if you're not in there, make sure you guys hop into the Discord. So it's a hop in place, lots of questions, lots of talking going on there every day. So we'd love to see you guys in there to hang out.
And Rupert, where can they find you, man?
Yeah, you can find me on X at Matthew Rupert FF.
Sweet. And you can find me at CouchScouts FF on Twitter /X. And we're also on YouTube at CouchScouts. So we'll see you there. We'll see you in the Discord, and we'll see you next week.